Ooh, baby. Spring Bill is back at it again. Tyran Stokes, the number one recruit in the class of 2026. They already have the number one recruit in the class of 2025 in Darryn Peterson. Could they get Stokes for back-to-back number ones? And could he reclassify to play with Darryn Peterson?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to Everydayers catching each and every show, wherever you find our podcast, whether it's on our YouTube page or anywhere you get your podcasts. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're going to be discussing Tyran Stokes, who is the number one recruit in the class of 2026. He's going to be visiting KU this week. Could he reclassify? What does it mean? Could Kansas have back-to-back number one recruits? We'll also get into some underrated transfer portal targets that are available. And as my curse continues on, I'm sure multiple of the players I'll discuss end up committing by the time you listen to it. Anyway, we'll also get to the latest offseason news for KU. First, this episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. And right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. You know who I would not be betting against right now? Bill Self working the spring recruiting pitches, because Tyran Stokes is the number one recruit in the class of 2026. And he is going to be visiting Kansas this upcoming week. This according to On3 and Mike Vernon. And that with Stokes, this is a player who some people are questioning, could he reclassify into the class of 2025, join this year? Would it be a future player? I'll say this from the start, whether this would be somebody who would join you in 2025 or 2026, either way, it's really like cool, possible news, right? And we'll see what ends up happening from it. But like, he's the number one player in his class. So like, regardless of if you were to get him to commit, he could join in 2025, 2026, 2027. Wouldn't matter. You'd be getting an awesome basketball player, and that would be, newsworthy to discuss. So who is Tyran Stokes? Well, he is a 6'7", 245-pound forward who might be like the perfect college four-man. When you think of like the ideal college four-man, he's somebody who has enough power to play in the post, has enough athleticism to play on the outside, has good feel, has good touch, right? Like, and he is a lot of these things. He's from Louisville, Kentucky originally, but right now he plays in Southern California at high school at Notre Dame High School in Southern California, which is they're in one of the better leagues in their CIF in Southern California. But this dude is a sick athlete. Like, I highly recommend, watching some of his highlights. Sometimes you see guys' highlights at the high school level and it says, oh, okay, cool. Like, he made shots and he did this and that. Like, it's fun to see some of the highlights, but it's just like, okay, like, I get it. He's a good basketball player, right? There are certain kids where their high school highlight reels are like different. And sometimes it's guards, that have the kind of sauce to them, and then they're shaking and baking guys and doing ridiculous things. For this guy, it's because he is this mix of like athlete power, that is really fun to watch, just get out and transition and throw down some of these fun dunks and see what he can do athletically. And like, I think when you're looking at a player comp, like, it's hard because there's not a lot of guys out there who are 6'7", 245 pounds, but are also mega athletes. A lot of times the guys who are 6'7", 245 as forwards, they're more bowling ball types, right? They're just going to outstrength you on the inside. Maybe they're not the fleetest of foot, right? Maybe they're not the quickest, but that's not the case at all. And when you look at Stokes, when you just look at a picture of him, when you look at, the highlights of him, you wouldn't know that he's 245, I don't think. Like, he wears that weight very, very well. Like in the way that you'll hear some comps of like Zion Williamson, which I don't know. There are certain things where I can understand that. But like with Zion, you knew that, okay, he's 6'6", 6'7", but like, you can tell this dude is big. He's whatever he was. I don't know what he was listed at, 260, 270, whatever. With Stokes, you could convince you, like, if you didn't know the way, you go, oh yeah, like 6'7", 225, based on the way he moves, based on the way he looks out there. And so you see some of the stuff with Zion Williamson in terms of like I think different in a lot of ways than Zion. I think Zion may be more powerful. Zion more of like a 4'5", and now is somebody that on the offensive end, you want the ball in his hands. With Stokes, His offensive game also has power. It also has athleticism. It also has athleticism for, a dude who's 6'7" and has power at 245 pounds and throws down awesome dunks. There are some of the similarities there. I think Stokes, though, maybe a little bit more feel in terms of his passing ability. With Zion, maybe that even quicker first step, even though Stokes is a good athlete. But it's another level of power and athleticism with Zion. But like, you can see some of the archetype there. You can see some of the archetype of like wings who have good feel and could do a little bit of everything. I think I saw NBA Draft Net compared him to like Caron Butler, which I don't know. That feels like maybe you're trying to make a reach to be like a little bit of a hipster comparison, but nonetheless, he's still working on his shooting. He's still working on, some of the intricacies of the game, but like his ability to handle the ball as the player that he is, his ability to pass as the player that he is, that basically when you look at 6'7", 245, you think of a four-man. And I think on the defensive end, that kind of works perfectly. On the offensive end, though, you see a lot of his game, and that's where the difference is with him and Zion's game, I think, especially like Zion mostly operated, especially in college, as more of a 4-5, like I said. With Stokes, you watch him and he has, in a lot of ways, he operates like a guard. He operates more like a 3 who's a ball handler on the offensive end of the floor. He's got nearly a 7-foot wingspan, so like that is obviously very helpful. Scouting reports mention him playing with a high motor, having a good second jump, which makes sense when you watch his athleticism. He's a good rebounder because of it. He played for Team USA at the FIBA under-16 and under-17 championships. In 2023 at the under-16s, he averaged a little over 10 points, about 5 rebounds, 4 assists per game. So again, you see kind of the overall game with the loaded stats. This past summer, so I guess this past summer, 2024, the summer of 2024, he was in the FIBA under-17 World Cup, and he averaged 12.3 points, 7 rebounds, 5.6 assists per game. Those are all really good numbers and really spread it out. That was over 6-game span. What makes those numbers, though, really crazy, he did all those, like, again, those are all like good numbers. There's not one that's like an insane number, but they're all good numbers, especially when you pair them together. He did all that in 18 minutes per game. So now think about if you're playing 30 minutes per game, how does that equate out, right? 12 points per game becomes, 20 points per game, right? 7 rebounds per game becomes 10 or 11 rebounds per game. 5.6 assists per game becomes, 8 or 9 assists per game. That's what he was doing against world competition. He also shot 67% on twos in that competition. So you can't stop his power and athleticism inside. Now, like I said, you're still working on 3-point shooting, 4-14 from 3 in that event in 6 games, only 55% on free throws. I think the high school ranks, he was in the low 60s on free throws. So, the shooting is going to be the big question there for him there, but he's also he's not a non-shooter either. And because it's with Zion. Like, Zion had some games where he was able to hit some threes, but like he wasn't like this super high volume, like knockdown 3-point shooter for Duke. It just still didn't matter. If you were solely, it's like the same thing with Udoka. Like, right, every defense knew that Doak was going to try to dunk on you or get in and shoot like a 3-foot hook. Didn't matter. He still shot 75%. It's like with Zion, you know what he's going to do. He's going to drive. He's going to try to overpower you. He's going to get a big dunk or he's going to get an offensive putback, but it didn't matter. He was so elite at it. And that's kind of how you look at it with Tyran Stokes, that he's so good at the things that he's good at that it just doesn't really matter in some other areas. And this was an article from November, but NBA Draft Net that I mentioned earlier, they listed like their top 10 high school prospects at that point in time. And one was, this is all high school prospects. 1 was DeBonsa, 2 was Peterson, 3 was Cam Boozer. They had him at, they had him at 3, and then Cam Boozer at 4, Nate Ament at 5. I don't know if you'd agree with the Boozer thing and maybe with him being McDonald's co-MVP with Peterson. Maybe if you were to redo that now, it'd be Peterson 1 and Boozer 2 or DeBonsa 2 and the other 3. And then you'd have him 4. But like, still, this is a dude who can, change a season for some team, right? And then this was interesting too. So we established the bottom line, like very good basketball player, right? This was a report according to EliteHoopsSpotlight.com that he announced that he's not going to be playing AAU basketball this summer. Now, what could be the reasoning going into that? Does he just not want to risk getting injured? Does he just not interested in doing it and has other plans? Does he have an awesome trip to Europe? Possibly. Who knows? It's also possible, though, that, like, why else would you do? It's like the Brian Windhorst. Well, why would you, right? Is it possible that he's planning on reclassifying, and so that's why he's not going to, because he's planning on joining a school in the middle of summer? Age-wise, He's not one of those guys who, if he joined a school in 2025, he wouldn't be eligible for the 2026 NBA draft. He would be, age-wise. He would be eligible for the 2026 NBA draft. So, in theory, if he starts his clock 1 year earlier, he can still get to the NBA draft, therefore getting paid by the NBA even sooner, and therefore getting to his second contract even sooner, hitting free agency at a year younger, making more money, right? It's that second and third contract where you make your real money in the NBA. Now, there's also maybe some smoke that he wouldn't reclassify and that maybe it's just not going to be doable here. But, like, I feel like this stuff usually gets figured out. And it's also possible that, like, if his camp or there's some people saying that he's not going to reclassify, what are the chances that's being spewed from his camp as a negotiating tactic to be like, well, no, it's just not going to work out. Maybe if you can up that NIL offer just a little bit more. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying, like, everything is on the table at this point in time with college basketball. And you can also point to with reclassified players that, like, yeah, there are some that have reclassed up and have struggled. I think a lot of them are point guards. That's the position where I'm like, I don't think you should reclass up. Now, Elyjah Cadeau did it okay for North Carolina, but the wings and the forwards tend to not have issues there. Like, I don't know why the two guys I automatically think of as reclassing up are both Duke guys, Marvin Bagley, who is a All-American, and Cooper Flagg, who is the National Player of the Year. So it worked out just fine there. I'm sure it'll work out for Stokes if that's what he decides to do. There's also an argument about what is the best, division of funds for KU. Like, would they be better off getting Stokes for 2026, spread the love between him and Peterson, and then using your NIL money on this year's roster on a more proven college basketball player? I think, like, you could maybe have that argument if it was like the 18th best recruit in the country. Like, you don't know for sure he's going to be good. Just go out and get a all-conference college basketball player. That's different when it's the number one recruit in the country in Stokes, a dude who, could be a lottery pick, a dude who could be an absolute game changer and raise your ceiling to the nth degree, right? And so even if he didn't reclass and this is just about recruiting for the class of 2026, that'd be pretty cool too, because Kansas would have an opportunity to get back-to-back number one recruits, which, as much as Bill Self's been able to land guys like Andrew Wiggins and Josh Jackson and Darryn Peterson, they haven't done it in back-to-back years, right? And so that would be another step for the program that would be really cool to see. But, of course, he's from Kentucky. You'd imagine Kentucky and Louisville in it. He previously played with A.J. DeBonsa, and there was some recent news about some stuff with him and BYU. And obviously BYU has been money bags to this point in time that, like, they could probably bring him on if they wanted to. So who knows where this all goes. But, yeah, if KU could make it work, boy, would that be a lot of fun. All right, who are some underrated transfer portal targets? Let's discuss next. Today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving all new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy. It's super easy interface, super easy to track your bets. I'm big on, going into the golf tournaments each and every week, and we're especially rolling now after Masters Week last week onto the RBC Heritage. You can do that with FanDuel, whether it's picking a top five, picking a winner, picking a first-round leader, or if you're interested in the NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs coming up, you can get a same-game parlay with three-pointers and steals, or on hockey, on a anytime goal scorer and shots on goal and who's going to win the game. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for your chance to win big. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Thank you for joining us on Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen. Thank you to everybody who's catching all our shows. Don't forget to check out Locked On College Basketball or Locked On College Football for your second listen every day. All right, who are some of my favorite under-the-radar players still available in the portal, at least at this point in time? By the time you listen to this, who knows? One of them could have committed, right? We did this with the top 10 list, and then kid committed like as we were releasing the episode. Let's start with Elyjah Freeman. I don't know how deep I've gone on Freeman. He is a 3-4 wing from Lincoln Memorial, which is a Division II school. And he's a 6'8" wing. And I know maybe some Kansas fans are a little spurned, like, they brought in Cam Martin, who was like a really good D2 player, and that didn't work out. I am telling you, in the same way that a lot of people were like, I don't know about Zeke Mayo because they brought in Nick Timberlake, the shooter from a small conference. It's not going to work out. And I was like, trust me, they're very different players. That is the case here too. You know, you look at it, Cam Martin was a really good D2 player because he was more skilled. He was bigger, right? He was with Freeman. You watch his highlights. This dude's throwing down dunks from a foot inside the free throw line. He's a very good athlete that would translate up. So 19 points, 9 rebounds per game, 58% from the field, 46% from three, 80% at the foul line, 98th percentile in D2 in effective field goal percentage, 97th percentile in O rating, 68th percentile in D rating. That dude's a stud, and he's going to be a sophomore, so you have a bunch of years left with him possibly. So, like, he is somebody who's very underrated to me. I think he's an incredible athlete, and I think he's good enough to make that jump. I really do, especially after you see a guy like Bennett Sturts come up and, you know, be was he a third-team All-American for Drake this past year? And I don't know that he's actually one of the 15 best players in the country, but, like, he had a very good season and was on a team that, you know, made it to the second round of the tournament. So, yes, I think Freeman is undersold a little bit. Moving to Freeman, more of a 3-4 type wing. Moving to a kind of a 2-3 type wing. I haven't talked a lot about Elyjah. He was at Southern Illinois. Before that, Abilene Christian. Before that, Chicago State. He's 6'5". He'll be a redshirt senior. Over 17 points per game for the Salukis this year. 1.5 steals per game. Good there. 49% from the floor. That's good there. 34 from three. Just a bit below that. So that's okay. But he's 81st percentile for his position in offensive rebound rate. 61st percentile for defensive rebound rate. 63rd percentile in free throw attempt rate. 54th percentile in Hakeem rate. So he just does a bunch of things like average to above average, and 99th percentile in his percentage of paint points per 40 minutes. Can really put pressure on the rim. He's somebody who, you know, if he was coming off the bench for you, I would really like him as a bench scorer to be able to come in and provide a little bit of punch. I think he's underrated in that way. And again, all of these are contingent. Like, when you're under the radar player, I don't think it's like, oh, I'm saying all these guys should come in and be starters or this and that. No, like, some of them are role dependent. Right? With Deba, I wouldn't want him to come in and be a starter, but I think he'd be a great bench piece and an underrated one at that. A guy who just entered, I forget if it was today or yesterday, and he's another 2-3, although he actually played some 4 at some recent stops, though his stats tell you he'd maybe be better as a 2-3, but it's Damari Monsanto. Played at UTSA, Wake Forest, and ETSU. Isn't Monsanto like a farming patent thing? I don't know. Anyway, 11.1 points per game, 4 rebounds per game, 42% from three on almost 8 attempts per game. Also 93% at the free throw line. So at UTSA, he had a solid year. Year before that, he was hurt at Wake Forest, limited games played. Year before that at Wake Forest, when he was playing more games, he had a plus 10.3 on-off O rating, and the team was 5 points better defensively when he's on the floor too. So this is a guy who 91st percentile defensive rebound rate for his position, doesn't really offensive rebound, doesn't get to free throw line. He's just a shooter on offense, and on defense, he'll get you rebounds, he'll get you steals. And 6'6", 225, you can play him at the 2 through 4. I think Monsanto would be kind of a great addition as a role player to any team. Let's go with Christian Davis. Next up, he is a 3-4 wing who recently or entered in from Bradley. And he's somebody who his on-off numbers don't like him that much. So I don't know, maybe that bodes looking into a little bit more. But this guy was very efficient. 52% from the floor, 44% from three, 83% at the free throw line, 91st percentile O rebound rate, 77th percentile defensive rebound rate, 93rd percentile Hakeem rate, and he did it on a 21st percentage usage rate, meaning that he doesn't need the ball. He's a good role player to have. He's 6'7". You can play him at the 3. You can play him at the 4. He takes efficient shots. He makes efficient shots. He rebounds the basketball well. And Bradley was a good team this year. Had Drake not been as good as they were, Bradley would have had a good chance at making it to the NCAA tournament this season. So Davis, somebody to keep an eye on. Corey Washington is kind of a 2 through 4 wing. If you want somebody who can play the 2-3 but also give you a bunch of rebounds, he can be your guy a little bit. And the thing with Corey Washington coming from Wichita State is that you're not, obviously it's not the Big 12 or the SEC, but it's a smaller jump than it is coming from, the MEAC or something like that. But 13.7 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. The team was 11 points better when he was on the floor offensively. They were about 5.5 points better when he was on the floor defensively. Just an elite rebounder. And he played 2 Big 12 opponents this season. Now, it was bottom tier Big 12 teams in Oklahoma State and K-State. But in those 2 games, 19.5 points per game, 10.5 rebounds per game. So I think he's kind of an underrated player too. Mr. Dean is somebody that, I don't know, I think there was a little bit of talk about KU at the beginning of the portal opening. Doesn't seem like it's materialized at all. Maybe he hasn't committed yet because he's waiting it out. And Kansas is like, yeah, if it gets to this point, maybe. Not really a shooter, but 6'6", 210 pounds, really good athlete, 98th percentile fast break points, 100th percentile paint points per 40, 99th percentile in Hakeem rate, and also a very good offensive rebounder. Also very good at the rim, 57% overall. And the team was 10 points better with him on the floor offensively. They were 12 points better defensively with him on the floor. If he's coming off the bench and is kind of your Kevin Young, I kind of would love that as being like a wing who can play the 3 or the 4, or I guess even in a pinch, like a small ball 5, if like you have 2 or 3 bigs get in, foul trouble in that situation. Marcus Banks is kind of an interesting guard that I think has been undersold a little bit to a certain point in time. He's from UMBC, Odessa Community College, before that Western Carolina. 42% from 3, 8 attempts per game. This would be your Diggy Coit, Jalen Coleman-Lands role. And again, it's impossible to know, like, does he want to be the star at some school, a smaller school, or is he comfortable with that role? If he would be somebody that I'd be like, yes, he would be perfect for that specific role. Let's go with a couple centers to finish up here because KU is in need of backup center. I've mentioned Matas Vokietitis, the center from Florida Atlantic. He'll only be a sophomore this season, which gives you the opportunity to sell him on the idea that, hey, you can be the backup big this year. You'll get, 10, 12, 15 minutes per game. And I don't know that you want him playing next to Flory a ton, but if you need to do it for 5 minutes a game, like fine. And then you can sell him on, well, Flory's ideally going to have a good enough season. He'll go pro after the year, and then you can be the starting center if you perform up to par. But 10 points per game, 68% from the field, and he can really score and he really rebound. 95th percentile offensive rebound rate, 82nd percentile defensive rebound rate, 71st percentile block rate. So that would be a nice thing to have kind of coming off the bench for you. And then let's go with another center, Maxim. I don't know if it's Logie or Logu, but he is a transfer from Oregon State. Not a ton of stats there, so nothing I'm going to go over, but he did start because Oregon State had players leave in the portal before their Crown tournament game. And he had 18 and 10 against UCF. And now to be just a sophomore international player, I think those are some good underrated transfer prospects. I don't know if Kansas is going to have interest in any of them, but I think could fill specific roles on KU. All right, let's finish up. Latest news. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Jayhawks. All right, what is the latest news going on? Well, Melvin Council wrapped up his visit with KU, and KU, seemingly things went well. Is he going to open it up to other schools? Who knows? But it seems like with Council and Lee, like I don't know if this is a situation of Kansas wants one over the other, or they're just going to take whichever one commits first over the other. But both players recently visiting, so something to keep an eye on there. And then some other players who at one point there was some publicly listed KU interest, which again, when you see those lists, you do have to take them with a grain of salt, and you don't entirely know what the level of interest is, if it's even factual. But 3 players who there was, on one of those tweets by a Joe Tipton or a John Rothstein or whoever, the portal report or whatever, about Kansas having, contact or interest or whatever. Brendan Housen, who is the transfer from Kansas State, really good 3-point shooter. He's going to Iowa, which probably makes more sense for him. I kind of said if he comes into Kansas and he wants to play the Jalen Coleman-Lands role, Brandon Green role, where it's like, okay, you're the 8th or 9th guy, you might come in and, play a little bit more if you're making threes, then that's cool. But he'll get a bigger role at Iowa, so that makes sense. Vincent Brady, which was somebody who, that was kind of a one where it's like, oh, okay, KU is interested in this guy. That's kind of interesting. And he is a shooting guard from Missouri State. 13.5 points per game. Nothing really jumps off the page too much. 38% from 3. That's a really good number there. But ends up going to High Point, which tells you he wanted to be more of a primary player than probably what would have been a Kansas being the 9th or 10th guy, right? And then the last one here is Kamari McGriff, which there was a little bit of reported Kansas interest. And I don't know. So he goes to Kansas State. I think that's a good ad for Kansas State, who, I don't think has had the best portal season to this point, but I do like the addition of McGriff there. And the thing about McGriff is he isn't the best rebounder in the world, but he's very active. He'll get you blocked shots. He'll finish at the rim. And he's 6'9". You can play him at the 4. You can play him at the 5. He had 8 and 3 on 4 of 10 shooting against Tech. Like, I think he's a serviceable. They actually played against Kansas, UNC Wilmington. I forgot about that. He had 18 points and 7 rebounds against Kansas, did McGriff. So he's somebody who I thought, okay, he could have been a nice backup big for KU. If you want to play him for a handful of minutes, he's mobile enough to do it next to Flory Bidunga. You can play him as a backup center if you need to, right? I thought that would have made a little bit of sense, but I don't think it was one that, huge miss necessarily for KU. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. We'll be back with any breaking news, portal news, all the likes coming at you here on Locked On Jayhawks.